Welcome to Mogobe Nuggets of Wisdom podcast. My name is Mompoloki Lerumo Mogobe. Our objective is to enthuse, inspire, energize, and empower entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs of all stripes here in BW and beyond. We do so by inviting these entrepreneurs into our makeshift studio. Sometimes we call them to the restaurant, sometimes we go to our studio, and we ask them to share their experiential knowledge, their experiences and their expertise, and we ask them as many questions as we can, aimed at empowering you also as a viewer. Hello dear viewer, dear listener, my name is Mompoloki Lerumo Mogobe. By now you know that we bring the best content in Botswana in terms of entrepreneurship. We want things that are inspiring, that are energizing, that are empowering. So today I have a wonderful guest. I brought my good friend and fellow entrepreneur Arun to the studio. But as always, I leave him to introduce himself fully. Go ahead, Arun.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mogobe. It's a real opportunity to be here with you today and on your show. As you know, I'm a big fan of your show.
Thank you.
And I love the questions that you put forth and the speakers that you've brought on. I think it's a real class act, and it's a unique privilege to be invited to share some of my thoughts with you. You wanted to know a little bit about me?
Yeah, a little background, yes.
So, you know, as you said, I'm an entrepreneur. I've been an entrepreneur my whole life. I grew up in Lubatsi and went to school there.
Are you a film boy?
Yes, I am. We lived in town during the initial part of my childhood.
Yes.
Near the post office, and then eventually, when my parents built their own house, we ended up moving to Botswana, and of course, shortly after that, I went to the University of Botswana and moved to Gaborone, and from there, I went to the US, spent a good decade of my life there. Never thought I'll come back to Botswana. My mission when I went to the US was that, Botswana was too small for me, and I had big dreams, and I wanted to go and execute it there. Lo and behold, God Almighty had other plans for me, and my father, he took my father away in 2007, about 13 years ago. And then, yes, so I decided to move back. I sold everything I had in the US and decided to come back here and stake my claim on the future of Africa, really. So
what is your formal training and what do you do now?
That's a great question. So I'm a CPA. I'm a US CPA. I did my undergraduate degree in accounting at UB, and then my master's in accounting as well in the US. And then I took the US CPA exam, and I practiced. I had a tax practice in the state of Florida for 9 years before I sold and moved back to Botswana. And my interest was always in insurance and technology. I'm a finance guy. I've got a finance brain. So my interest was in insurance. And when I was a kid, when I was 14 and my brother was 12. We started a small internet company out of our garage in Lubatsi, and it was quite nice because nobody knew about the internet at that time in Botswana, and we went out and created this internet company, and that gave me an interest in technology. So I've evolved from studying accounting but being an entrepreneur in the technology space in a very small way when I was a kid to doing accounting and tax planning as kind of a profession for 9 years, to eventually kind of following my heart, which is what Alpha Direct is. It's my dream in terms of what I think the future can be, and I've chosen to do it here back home in Botswana because I see that the future is going to be in Africa.
I'm sure the detail will come out as to exactly what Alpha Direct is about. But today, dear viewer, dear listener, we're going to talk about building scalable ventures in Botswana. And I think Arun is here to basically break the subject down. And I think a good starting point, Arun, would be the entrepreneurial mindset. What is it, and how do you develop the entrepreneurial mindset?
Yeah, so growing up, I grew up in a family that was in business. My father was a professional. He was a practicing chartered accountant for many years until 1993, when he started his first sort of business. Because when you're a professional, as you know from your history, your time is not your time. It is owned by your clients, and you get paid by the hour or whatever it is. And so I don't look at practice or profession as really a business. I would say, as Robert Kiyosaki says, you're still in the S quadrant, the self-employed quadrant. And so I grew up in a business family, and we had a certain mindset. We were trained from a young age to develop a certain mindset towards life and towards a certain thing. Because this is a short program, I'm going to keep it really concise, but it essentially centers around having a problem-solving mentality. So entrepreneurship is about solving problems. It's about looking at a situation, whether that be in your town, in your neighborhood, in your country, on the continent, or in the world, and then figuring out what is lacking in that particular situation, and then acting to solve the problem that you see.
How do you develop that mindset? I think that's the heart of my question.
It's a fantastic question, because I think this is, if we can develop more of this mindset, I think we can solve a lot of society's problems much quicker. And that's something I think all of us can aim towards. I mean, we all want to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. I think it starts with who you associate with. It starts with what are the discussions happening around your dinner table at home. Obviously, if you have a conducive family environment, this is something that will come automatically, because your father, your mother are spending time around the table talking about what they see and business, and entrepreneurship extends even beyond business in my view, because it's really about looking at a situation and saying, hey, this doesn't look like this could be done better. And figuring that out. So it's about what discussions you're having around there. And it's about being inquisitive. Like, I've never met an entrepreneur in my life who isn't inquisitive. So it's like when we're children, we're born with this inquisitive mindset. Somewhere along the way, the education system or our family structures or whatever kills that creativity and kills that.
Let's dig deeper. I want to go to the nature argument. Is entrepreneurship a nature, or is it something that you nurture? In other words, are entrepreneurs born, or are entrepreneurs made? That's the real question.
It's something I spend a lot of time thinking about. Because I always wonder, can we translate this? And when I think back to my father, who had a big influence in my life early on, he believed that everybody could be an entrepreneur, and he invested in people from all walks of life, engineers and so on, and said, I believe you can be an entrepreneur. After spending a couple of decades in entrepreneurship and business myself, I've come to the conclusion that it's a combination of both. So I think there are some people that are just born to be entrepreneurs. I think I was one of them. When I was 9 years old, I knew that I wanted to be an entrepreneur, and I did not want anything else in my life. But I also have met some people who accidentally become entrepreneurs, who don't know that they're entrepreneurs from the beginning, and then somehow the curiosity leads them to entrepreneurship, and they make very good entrepreneurs. So I think for somebody like me, who I consider to be a born entrepreneur, having the nurture helped in a big way to cut many years out of my journey and give me more success than I probably deserved at a much earlier stage. But I think if you look at it statistically, you'll find that the probability is higher of success, and that's the reason why we feel like entrepreneurs are born. When you're a born entrepreneur, you're a hustler, you're out there doing things at a very young age, like I was, and many other friends of mine were, then your chance of success is higher, so more people hear about you.
All right. Using Alpha Direct as maybe a case study, or as a reference point. What are the differences between lifestyle, family businesses, and scalable, investable businesses?
My father told me when I was a kid, my father was a practicing chartered accountant, so he knew what everybody's balance sheet looked like. And he knew what lifestyles these businessmen were living. And he always told me, he says, you never judge a man's wealth by the car that he drives. And of course, today, we live in a world with a little bit. So often he used to tell me that the car that somebody drives is usually owned by the bank, and the people with the real money are not the ones driving the biggest cars. So that mentality sort of stuck with me. And what I find is that the majority of entrepreneurs are entrepreneurs because they want to provide for their families, and they want to live a certain lifestyle. So entrepreneurship for them leads to a certain lifestyle. There's nothing wrong with that, but my view is that we need more non-lifestyle entrepreneurs. That is, entrepreneurs
that are scalable, investable ventures.
Yes, entrepreneurs that are driven by something beyond their own personal needs and their own personal lifestyle. So the differences are quite obvious in the sense it's about what you're driven by. If you wake up every day in the morning and you say, I need to make the most amount of money, and the reason I need to make the most amount of money is so that I can finance this lifestyle that I want to live, then by definition, whatever business you're building or whatever entrepreneurial venture you're undertaking is not going to be investable. So the distinction is the intention behind what you're doing, and that distinction leads to whether a business can successfully raise capital and scale.
So how would you tie it with Alpha Direct?
Great question. So I've never been a lifestyle entrepreneur. I think that I like to invest for the long term, and whatever I do, I commit myself 110% to it. And I know that I won't see results in the short term. And we were losing money for the first 3 years. We lost about 10 million pula of shareholders' funds in the first 3 years of us running our business. So
it's huge.
So it is. And I mean, you would have seen the kind of advertising impact and the marketing budget that we had to sustain to build our business model out was so vast that we had to do that. And I think it's really driven by what I was trying to build. So we wanted to build a business that could exhibit exceptional growth and do so under any sort of condition. So for that, you have to think very differently. And so I think it's about relating what the intention of the entrepreneur is. And my intentions were always to build a business that 20 or 30 years down the road could be sort of a model for building scalable, technology-driven businesses out of Botswana.
That's powerful. I really like that. All right. Now, let's talk about mentorship, because I happen to be a member of the mentorship committee of the Angel Investors Network, and it's a very important subject. So what is really the importance of role models and mentors? I suppose you can give your life as an example.
Actually, it's a right example. So when I moved back to Botswana, I said, well, my life can't just be about building a business. However great that business is, my life has to be about more than that. I have to make it about more than that. And so I said, okay, well, with my usual curiosity and so on, I said, well, why is it that I'm able to think of new ideas and execute on them? And there's so many other people in our society here in Botswana that perhaps are just as intelligent or more intelligent than I am, most likely more intelligent, perhaps have got are as driven, as hardworking, and have got great ideas as well. Why are they not able to execute the way that I am able to do it? And when I started working with a lot of the startup ecosystems here around 2013, I noticed that the only lacking ingredient was two things. Lack of role models, like really good role models who people could look up to and say, I want to be like that guy. And the second was a distinct lack of basic business knowledge, like break-even point. How do you calculate break-even point? What does it take to reach profitability? How does scale enable a business to make more profits than a business that doesn't scale, et cetera, and putting that into there. So I felt that there was a need for sort of mentorship to take place. And coming back to the point of how does it personally relate to me? I've had the fortunate situation of having my dad, who was probably the greatest mentor ever, not just for me, but for a lot of young people in my generation. And he was a really good mentor. And when I lost him in 2007, I was a little bit lost for a while. I didn't have much direction in life, and I was questioning what the purpose of my life was.
Yeah.
And I met a really great mentor. I met two great mentors, actually. One is a guy called Chris Fredrickson in the US, and I used to do the seminar circuit with him. And he's also a CPA. And the other is Dr. Kiran Patel, who I met and who eventually became
the heart specialist.
Yes, the guy who wrote me my first check, who was born in Zambia, went to the US and built $2 billion insurance businesses, became a philanthropist full time and gave away 70% of his wealth. And it was like I met him in Tampa Bay right after my dad passed away. So about 2008, I met him. And I sat down with him. My brother and I went to meet him. And I sat down with him. And I didn't know him from Adam. But first, like within about 30 minutes of meeting him, I told him, I said, when I grow up, I want to be exactly like you. And fortunately, he also kind of liked us and he liked talking to us. And, he felt that we were driven to achieve something, and then finally, when I decided to move back, he wrote me my check, the first check that got it.
Wow. More
symbolic than anything, but
as an investor.
Yeah, as an investor. Okay. So he actually owns about 16% of Alpha Direct today.
Yeah. Let's talk money language. There's language and there's money language. Why is that important, and what's so significant about money language?
Great question.
Words, how do you tell it apart from ordinary language?
So the reason I chose money language as the topic is because our friend V Mampizi came up with this song Money Language, and so I thought it'll be very relatable to everybody within Botswana.
Yeah.
And so I want to kind of give my perspective on money language and why it's important. And earlier I talked about how there was two things that I felt were lacking in our ecosystem here to really kick our entrepreneurship to the next level. One was the mentorship issue, which we talked about.
Yeah.
And the second was what I will call a lack of understanding of money language. So I think it's about understanding how money works. And, you're a capitalist expert. You've got real estate. And real estate is a great example of how money works. So you understand leverage. You intrinsically understand how you can go to a bank and you can borrow money based on a project that you're doing, and then you can get tenants, and those tenants help you to pay the bank back, and you end up with an asset.
Yes.
It's shocking how many people don't understand this, and my dream would be to have people understand it at a younger age in Botswana, rather than having to go through life and at the age of 50 or 55 now finally get what all this actually means. So money language to me is very simple. It's about speaking about money, not being afraid to talk about money.
Even around the dinner table.
Even around the dinner table. It's not a bad word. And I once asked my spiritual guru about this, because he was always talking about, why money is not a good thing and so on. And, oftentimes you'll find in society that, people will feel that people say that, no, but money, money results in evil and that sort of a thing. And my view is that it's not, money itself is just a tool. It's a piece of paper at the end of the day that we are exchanging for value, perceived value. But the difference is in our perception of money. Do you perceive money as defining who you are, or do you perceive money as a tool to use to do something in the world, and what your contribution to the world ultimately can be as a result of that? And so I think, to cut a long story short, to me, money language is about understanding money, appreciating and befriending money, not being afraid to talk about money with your family, with your friends, and to use
actually
money.
study it, I guess.
To study it, to use it, and say, hey, you can leverage money to make more money. There's always the saying that the first million is the hardest, and it's very true, because once you have the first million,
I'm sure from your experience, certainly from my experience, it was almost impossible.
I know, and look, I find myself in a very fortunate position, and the reason I want to do a lot to help others is because my father broke out of what I call the middle class mentality, and he struggled to do that. He arrived in Botswana in 1980 with $23 in his pocket and a chartered accountancy certificate, and from there, he went out and built. So he did a lot of the hard work. I'm not going to take credit for that.
He made the foundation.
He made the foundation.
You are second generation.
I'm second generation.
A lot of Botswana listening now are first generation entrepreneurs.
Yes. And so I understand that I come from a position of privilege, but I also don't think that it's necessarily, first generation, second generation should have the same goals. So, my father had a goal of providing for his family and so on and so forth. And then once he attained that, then his goal was, well, how can I have impact in society? How can I use business as a tool to do that? And, I think when you look at our second generation, we've picked up from where he left off, and we've said, well, how can we have impact on a big scale? How can we change the mindset of people? How can we create a more endearing institutions? That sort of a thing.
That really helps me get to the next point, which is the issue at the heart of our conversation, which is scale. Why is it important to scale? I happen to believe, as you do, that a business that does not scale actually doesn't stagnate. It regresses. It goes back.
Absolutely.
So I think you must help the listener understand why it is not good enough to maintain what you have, why it's important to keep growing.
You're so right, and I love the fact that we both speak money language.
Yes.
And I'll tie this into the end of what we're going to talk about. But
yes.
But I think we have a common understanding of. My father always used to say this when we were kids. He says stagnation is not anything other than slow death. Stagnation is slow death. So you're dying, but you just don't know that you're dying. And the reason is because there is inflation, and it's real. And if you're not able to keep pace with that inflation, you are regressive. And so simply because you are doing the same thing that you did last year and not doing better this year, it doesn't mean that you're doing well. You're actually doing badly, you're doing worse. And so business is so dynamic that in the blink of an eye, the whole world has changed. I mean, you look at the COVID situation we're in right now, I'd probably be sitting a lot closer to you if this was a few years earlier, a few months earlier.
Yeah.
So the thing is, we have to have an understanding that stagnation is slow death. And I think that if we're not able to be dynamic and we're not able to wake up every day and think about how we're going to
grow our businesses
and make ourselves irrelevant, then we're not doing enough. I remember there was a CFO of our manufacturing business that came to me once and said, you know what, we just made our biggest profit in the history of this company. I think, I feel like we should just, take a chill pill now and just keep things going as they are. And I got him and I said, if that's your mentality, then please fire yourself first, because you are no longer useful to the organization. The organization is dynamic and it must keep changing.
Yes.
In fact, we must eliminate ourselves. And so that is kind of the mantra by which I like to operate, and I like to encourage other entrepreneurs to operate, which is that you wake up every day in the morning and you look for change, you hunt for change, you find that change and you execute on that change, and you eliminate yourself. That's the ultimate idea.
Wow, that's brilliant. Now let's get deeper into the money language in terms of the art of raising money. What have you learned? It is an art, it is not a science. What have you learned about the art of raising money?
Yeah, this is something that I've learned a lot in the last couple of years as we have scaled Alpha Direct from a startup to now a scale-up where we're trying to expand product offerings, and we're trying to expand our geographical reach and so on and so forth. And of course, it's taken a lot of money. I mean, I told you we lost 10 million in the first 3 years of running our business.
Maybe you didn't lose it. Maybe you invested it in.
That's how I would like to look at it, and that's how I
school fees.
and absolutely, and that's how I hope my investors also look at it. I think the idea is, I have a couple of principles that I've learned about raising money, and you'll find that whether you're raising equity or you're raising debt, like you probably do for your real estate projects, the mantra and the ethos is the same. You never ever go and ask for money when you really need it, because nobody wants to give it to you when you really need it. So we always plan in advance.
Explain that. I agree with that and I believe it, but the listener may be saying, look, that's counterintuitive. Why? Why do banks give us money only when we don't need it?
And it's true, because banks, in a capitalist system, everybody is looking out for their own interest. And so the banks are not non-profit institutions. They're there to pick the winners and not fund the losers. The same way, investors are looking to pick the winners and not give their money away to people who are going to lose it.
Yes.
So you have to understand the ruthless nature of the funding game and how it works. And while it doesn't totally fit in with my spiritual values, it's the reality that we find ourselves in. Would I like to see a world where people get money to do beautiful things in the world that never make any return? Absolutely, I would like to see that. But is that the reality on the ground? Absolutely not.
It's not realistic.
So it's not realistic. So within the realm of realism that we live in, the one important lesson that I have is you always raise money on the front foot, which means when you're sitting across the table from a banker, or you're sitting across the table from an investor, the first message and the first words that should come out of your mouth is that I do not need your money. If it's not from you, I'll get it from somebody else. And even if that somebody else doesn't give it to me, I've already figured out how I'm going to make what I want to happen. So that automatically puts you in a position of advantage when it comes to the power dynamics of the situation. So it's very important when you're an entrepreneur to understand power dynamics and understand how they work and how to ethically use power dynamics to achieve your overarching goal, which should be to make society better, to solve problems in the world, etc., etc. So first lesson is always raise on the front foot. Second lesson is planning. When in my first career, I never planned. And I was always playing catch up. So I never anticipated, I need 200,000. I'm getting this order. I need 200,000 to fulfill this order. Do I have 200,000? No, I don't have 200,000. So where am I going to get it from? That planning process was never in place during my early days. And I learned the hard way that he who fails to plan plans to fail.
Yes, that's true.
And so I think planning is really important. So today at Alpha Direct, when we raise money, whatever instrument we're using, debt, equity, etc.
Which one is preferable to you, equity or debt?
It depends to me on what you're trying to achieve. And the way I like to do it, if I have all the options on the table to me, I like to raise equity where I believe there's a high execution risk. And I like to raise debt when there's a low execution risk. Because there's no point in me diluting my existing shareholders in order to do something which we already have done very well and succeeded at doing. So if we've got an existing product, it's very successful, and we want to simply roll out this product.
So how do entrepreneurs, especially young entrepreneurs, overcome that? The fear of dilution in the case where, as you suggest, in case where equity may be the vehicle you want to choose to raise money.
Yeah,
there is that inherent fear. Do you agree with me?
Absolutely, there is. Because nobody wants to lose control of their dream. That's the ultimate price that you pay for diluting to a point where you allow others to dictate terms to you. My view is that two things. Number one, it depends on what you want to try and achieve. So if you want to build something that solves a problem, the only way you're going to solve a problem is by doing it at a big scale. And if you're going to do it at a big scale, you will never have enough money to do it in the time period of a lifetime. That is, you will have to raise external capital in order to do it. Now, that external capital comes with risk. So it's about our risk perception. So if I perceive that there's a high degree of execution risk, I would rather not take the bank's money because I know I'm going to have to pay it back on a certain time frame. With an investor, with an equity investor's money, I know that if I take that money, it's going to be a little bit more patient. So even if I do fail in the execution or I stutter in the execution, which has happened on every project that I've ever taken up. I've never executed a project perfectly.
Well, likewise.
And anybody that ever tells you that they've executed a project perfectly is completely lying, because you're always going to hit snags in anything that you execute, and you have to plan for that, you know. So just to put a little capstone on what we were talking about, I think that if you want to be what I regard as a great entrepreneur, somebody that solves big problems in the world, then you have no choice but to have a sharing mentality. Now, that sharing mentality doesn't mean that you go out and you dilute equity willy-nilly to anybody and everybody who gives you money. It's got to be strategic, which means if I am going to dilute, and I'm going to dilute because I'm bringing you into my cap table, I must dilute because I believe you're going to add more value than what you're taking from my existing shareholders, which might include me, might only be me, etc. And so that's the way to think about it. And there's no need to be afraid, because even if you dilute below a controlling interest, you're an attorney, you know that there's plenty of things that you can put into there. You can have voting arrangements that are separate from ownership. You can have dual class stock structures. There's a lot of things.
Agreements, yes. All right, let's move on to our next point, which I really love. You describe entrepreneurship as about sacrifice, as a game of sacrifice. Why do you believe that it's the ultimate game of sacrifice, entrepreneurship?
It is the ultimate game of sacrifice. I've met many entrepreneurs in my life. I love meeting entrepreneurs. I love seeing their dreams becoming reality. To me, it's a very exciting journey. It's a journey filled with a lot of hardship. And from my experience, the real entrepreneurs, the ones that really want to go out and solve a big problem, they cannot have an expectation of seeing returns quickly. They cannot have a fly-by-night mentality. We built an industry in Botswana over 22 years. We, as the shareholders, never took any money out of the business. We reinvested 100% of our profits for 15 years. And
I'm sure many months you went without a salary.
Of course. So that's how it works. In fact, I was talking to our partner who is the MD of the business, and he was his technical guy was taking double the salary of him when they started the business, and even today, he was saying, I replaced my vehicle. I haven't replaced my vehicle in 7 years. Most people who make this much of money, they would want to replace their vehicle every 3 years, because that's not what you're driven by. It's like, hey, do I go out and do I buy another machine and create another 50 jobs, or do I go out and buy another fancy vehicle? It's what drives you and motivates you. And so it's a game of sacrifice, because when I look at those people who win in business, those people who win at entrepreneurship, they are the ones that made the most sacrifices.
In fact, on a large scale.
Absolutely.
I think it's even scriptural. It's those who serve the most who do the most.
Absolutely. And it comes back to this perception of what function a business serves in a society. And I think if you look at my perspective and a lot of other entrepreneurs' perspective, a business serves not only to serve the shareholders, but a whole variety of stakeholders. So yes, job creation is very important. Every business has an important role to create and sustain jobs. Every business has an important role to pay taxes and ensure that the society can continue to function. The good life that we all enjoy, the safety and security that we all enjoy, comes from the taxes that businesses are paying.
All right, let's talk about capitalism. You've answered that one very beautifully. This one, I think we may not even finish it in this conversation. Understanding capitalism and the good it can do, and why it's important to view capitalism as a force for good. Just give the listener a little bit of your thinking on this subject. I propose to invite you back so that we can dig deeper at another time.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is such a rich topic that there's so much to talk about.
Yes.
But I'll try and summarize my thought process around this. And I love hearing from other people also. So I look at it this way. If you go back 2 generations in my own family, we were not entrepreneurs. We were not business people. We were educated. My grandfather was a civil servant in India, worked for the public works department. He was an honest man, never took a bribe in his life. And lived his whole life in working for the government and in a very secure position and so on and so forth. And actually in our family, up until my father, entrepreneurship was viewed as something which was beneath us. It was viewed as something where we would have to compromise our ethics and our pride of being honest and straightforward people in order to engage in something that was greedy. And I know that, many cultures, this is the case. That is, entrepreneurship
There's
is...
still that perception, unfortunately.
There's a perception, it's looked down upon.
Yeah, we're working on it. There's a slight shift, I think, but it's still there.
It's still there. And I have never known anything else in my life. And I've personally seen the benefits of entrepreneurship because, I gravitated towards the United States where entrepreneurship is viewed as something very positive and something very empowering and so on. And I think in Botswana, I think for now, this is the 3rd administration that will be pushing the entrepreneurship agenda. I think SIDA was set up during Remohai's administration. And so, look, entrepreneurship as a force for good is inevitable. And the reason is because socialism is a great concept. And I actually conceptually, I agree with it.
It's great on paper.
It's great on paper. Like, we're all equal, which we are. And how do we split the resources in a way in which it's equally distributed to everybody? And many countries tried this. Russia, Cuba, etc. tried this.
Unfortunately, in my view, that's where it ends, just on paper.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What eventually happens is you have these leaders at the top that usurp all of the resources. And the real talented people either leave that system or they end up becoming lazy and not willing to contribute anything.
They certainly get very frustrating.
Absolutely. So capitalism as a system is the best we've come up with so far, and it's a system we live in today in the world today.
But you see it as a force for good.
Yes. I'm not saying that it's perfect. I also look around in society and I say, wait a minute, like I was born, in a hospital and grew up in a certain family. There were children that were born at the same time as me, like within a 10-kilometer radius, and their life and their trajectory and their opportunities are completely different. And only because my upbringing and my family understood capitalism and the capitalist system and how to put it to work for us. So I think the idea is that I believe that there's a new form of capitalism that needs to emerge. And what I would say is it's got to be compassion-driven capitalism. That is, those people who the capitalist system favors, like myself, like yourself, we wake up, we elevate our consciousness, and we realize that, whatever we have is a gift. It's been given to us. Yes, we've worked hard.
Let's share it.
Let's share it. And how do we share it? And I'm part of this movement called the Compassionate Capitalism Movement, the worldwide movement. And the idea is that they believe that the answer to sharing the benefits of capitalism is more capitalism. And so the idea is that we start to create enterprises, we start to use the skills, God-given skills that have been given to us, and we use that to further society. So at a certain point, you lose the drive to accumulate for yourself, and you gain the drive to accumulate for everybody around you.
100%. Which actually now ties with my next point on the sharing mindset. How you can continue to have that mindset at the same time retain your business savviness. That's the art form. I want you to break. I really like how you deal with it, but I really want you to help the listener understand that you can have the best of both worlds. Have the business savviness and still be sacrificial. And have a sharing mindset.
one day when I'm as advanced as you are and I have my own blog or my own book that I put out, this is exactly what I'm going to talk about, because I think it's incredible how you these two things we talk about, the sharing mindset and the business shrewdness, I would call it. How they very rarely, they don't seem to go together.
They seem to be opposites, but they're not.
They're not. And I think it's about a switch in the mind. From what I've seen, when you truly realize, when you realize from within that by sharing more and by sacrificing more, I get more. Your ego is satisfied that I'm getting more, and your soul is satisfied that I'm able to give more. So, it's the battle between the mind and the soul. The mind is creating this illusion of separation, that is, oh, Mr. Mogobe is not like me. He's different, I'm different. The soul intrinsically knows that we are one. And it's about unifying the two. So I think, to me, the basis starts and ends in spirituality. I think the more spiritual we become, the more connected we become with spirit, the more sort of we realize that, what's the point of me keeping more? I'm also going to be buried in the same ground that you're going to be buried in. Maybe you might be buried in 20 years, I might be buried in 30 years, or maybe it might be the other way around. We don't know, right? So the question is, right now, right here, what can I do to create an energy, a positive energy, an energy of sharing, so that when I create that energy of sharing, it goes around and goes full circle and comes right back.
Wow, that's beautiful. That's so wonderful. Now, let's talk about technology. You obviously use that technology a lot at Alpha Direct. Now, let's discuss the role of technology in business and why it's important in the context of Botswana, in fact, the world as a whole.
So COVID has really changed a lot in the world. I don't think it's changed things as much as it has accelerated what was already the trends in the world. Technology has always been, the disruptive force that has brought humanity to this point. So, when I think about technology, I don't think about it from the standpoint of just information and communication technology, which is what we do, but the fire, the man that discovered fire, that was a technology. How do you contain fire? How do you make fire? This was thousands of years ago.
You think of it as innovation.
Absolutely. So to me, Henry Ford was a technologist. Edison was a technologist. Bill Gates was a technologist. Elon Musk is a technologist. I am definitely a technologist at heart. I believe in the disruptive force of technology. I believe in the disruptive force of technology being used to improve people's lives, quality of lives, and ultimately to make the world a better place. And I think whether we like it or not, technology is going to be the core of every single enterprise. Every single business is going to be driven by technology. And so if you think about it, like for example, you have restaurants, and how can these restaurants be disrupted using technology? So now you have the delivery apps, people are ordering on their phones and they're expecting their food to be delivered. You may have to rethink a completely different revenue model. You may have a central kitchen where you can order from Nonas, you can order from Black, you can order from a variety of...
I'm glad you brought it up. Dear listener, we have a technology app. Look it up on Nonas and Black. You'll see our app, how it works.
So it's cool.
But what do you say to those who are resistant? There are people in my generation, for instance, who cannot believe that I'm on social media. They think I'm committing sacrilege. They just can't come to terms with it.
I don't blame them. Throughout history, there have been the people that are the early adapters, the people that look at something and say, yes, this can actually improve things. So I think if you go back, maybe when you were starting out your career, you could, even if you had the desire to take this message that you are trying to create about entrepreneurship and awareness that you're trying to create about entrepreneurship and entrepreneurship and so on, and spread it to as many people. Maybe at best you would have been able to spread it to the people who are in your town.
Yes.
Maybe by having a town hall and having a chat like this with a local entrepreneur. But now you can spread your message to people around the world. Sitting in little Botswana, you can have an impact on the world. And so there's always going to be those people who realize the impact of technology and are early adapters, and there are those people who will choose never to catch up in this lifetime. But that doesn't slow down the impact of technology on our lives. It only changes the impact of technology on your personal circumstances. So I think every business is a technology business. It's already a technology business. If you haven't realized that, you are simply behind the curve. And at some point in time, that reality is going to catch up to you.
Arun, there's one issue that I'd like us to cover before we part this afternoon. The issue of Indigenous Botswana. There's been a conversation, which I think ATI brought it to the fore, about the fact that the Indigenous Botswana business people are being marginalized, and they've been for many years. And there is a belief that, some of our foreign businesses, and when they say indigenous, they're not referring only to people with Umang or otherwise. They're referring to Botswana who are regionally from here, who don't have some of the benefits of entrepreneurship that others from outside have. So I'm curious to know your views on this. Is this a legitimate concern? And if so, what do you think can be done about it?
Yeah, so it was interesting because I think when ATI came out and expressed this, there was two schools of thought. There was the one school of thought, which is, this is just this crazy guy who, is expressing himself in the wrong way, etc., etc. And there was another school of thought, which was like all the support on social media, which was like, yeah, you're right. Like, what he's saying is truthful. And even if you look at my own circle of friends and family, and I have friends from across the spectrum. I have very close friends who are Black Botswana. I have very close friends that are Indigenous, that are Indian Botswana. I have white Botswana that are my friends. So it was really interesting because it was a very polarizing issue. And so, I internally in my family, my brother and I discussed a lot about this, and we said, you know what, this is something that we need to think about. So I think whichever camp somebody is in, we cannot avoid the issue that, however you think ATI expressed himself or that this whole thing is going, I think we cannot avoid the issue that there is a discrepancy. If we say that there's no discrepancy, I think we're lying to ourselves. Now, the question I believe we should be asking is, why is there that discrepancy? I think that everybody in their heart of hearts knows that, hey, there's this sort of disparity of income and so on, and it's now bubbled up to the surface, which I think is great because it enables us to have these conversations. And to address it and not just say, oh, okay, well, it's there, let's push it under the rug. And I think when I think about it, like, I really believe Botswana has a chance to be a model country in Africa and in the world. I think Botswana has a chance to be the Switzerland of Africa, the America of Africa, the Singapore of Africa,
the Dubai
of Africa. If we get it right, I think we really have that chance. And when I look back at what it is that makes these countries great, why do we look up to them and look down upon another country, say like Zimbabwe? Why is it that we feel Zimbabwe has not been successful? And why is it that we feel Singapore or Dubai or America has been successful? And it boils simply down to, obviously, the fact that the standard of living of the people who are from there has risen astronomically over the last recent memory.
Yeah, 20 years, definitely.
And when I look at the theme between all these countries that have done very well for themselves, and I wouldn't say all of them, but I'd say a majority of them, is its openness. It's openness to ideas and people from outside, and how the people from that country view people coming in from outside and kind of joining together to grow their economies. There have been various ways. So in Dubai, you can't start a business unless you have a Arab UAE citizen as your partner. That model has worked for them. Singapore is a totally open culture. It was started as a trading post that was envisioned by Lee Kuan Yew to become the giant in financial services and so on that it is today. And America is America. I mean, America is totally polarized along racial lines today, but what made America great is this fact that you can be any color, you can be any religion, and you can go to America and you can stake your claim on the American dream.
Yes.
And I think we have an opportunity in Botswana to uplift Botswana by having a system that is open. Now, having a system that's open requires a certain mindset. And that mindset means that we have to think about it from a broader perspective. That is, ultimately my belief is that as human beings, we're all the same. But when things are not going well, we tend to start to see the differences between us. The differences start to emerge. There's a lot of money floating around and everybody's happy, everybody's feeding their families, etc.
Your point exactly, because this came to the fore because of COVID. So things bubble up more when things are tough.
Right. So I think ATI has a point, and a very important point. And I think for my generation, he's an incredibly talented artist. There's no doubt about it. But he is expressing the frustration of the youth in Botswana.
Would you say it's a good idea to encourage Indian businesses, whether indigenous or not, to bring in Botswana as shareholders, not just as consumers?
Yes.
Because the pattern, I think, is undeniable that in the past, they're just seen as consumers. They're not seen as fellow participants in the...
Yeah, and I think part of the reason is, when you go back like 2 generations, somebody who comes from, if you grow up in India, you've never seen anybody other than an Indian your whole life. So you don't know that you are really the same. And I think I credit my father with not allowing my brother and I to grow up with that mindset. Because he always used to tell us that I have more in common with my Botswana entrepreneur friend than I have with the cook that is back home in India. Because we speak the same language. And this is what I was saying, you and I, we're both entrepreneurs, we speak the same language.
We do.
So we can do business together because when I say, Mr. Mogobe, we've got this business, we need to reinvest the profits for the next 10 years. You say, you know what, Arun, I understand why you need to reinvest the profits for the next 10 years. I speak the same language as you, and we're not doing it with the intention of let's try and make as much money as we can, as quick as we can.
Unfortunately, time is not 100% on our side. We've come to the end of our time together, but I'd like you to look at the camera and speak to the viewer, to the listener, and say something inspirational. A parting message, something they can hold on to, something to remember you by.
I think the one message that I would like to share with the world is that we are all in this together, and we all have to be the change that we want to see in the world. And I think we have a real chance here in Botswana to build something great, and I think we have to come together and make it happen. It's not going to be easy all the time. There's going to be difficulties, there's going to be misunderstandings, there's going to be miscommunications and fights and all that stuff. But I think what's important is that we keep our eye on the big prize, which is that I would like to see in my lifetime that there's not a single person in this country or even in the world who is suffering, who is faced with poverty as a choice in life. All the problems we face today are created by man, and it is up to man to solve those problems. So let's solve those problems together.
Obviously, you believe entrepreneurship is the vehicle.
Absolutely.
How does the viewer get in touch with you, maybe to take this conversation further or to learn something about the services that you offer?
So I would suggest, they can get in touch with me on social platforms. I don't engage a lot on social platforms, but I would love to engage with them. I'm maybe considered a little bit, elitist, because I want real entrepreneurs. I like the filtration system that you have in place, where you tell an entrepreneur, go out and do this, this, and this, read these books, and so on and so forth.
Yes.
And so I like to sort of deal with people that I truly believe.
Hungry, you're serious.
Yeah, hungry. I'm always hungry.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what I have, what I don't have. I'm always hungry, and I want to deal. So if you're truly hungry out there, call me. Hit me up on Facebook and Arun Iyer, and or Instagram, let's have a conversation. I'm very keen through A and B. To
tell them a little bit about A and B.
Yeah, so it's a great initiative that I think you and Anant and a couple of other of our colleagues have taken up. I've been involved with the ecosystem before A and B came into play, and then I've kind of integrated what I'm doing with A and B, because you guys have got such a great vision for what you're trying to achieve with A and B. So the Angel Network Botswana essentially is about mentoring and investing in real entrepreneurs, in good entrepreneurs who have scalable ideas that we can go out there and use as a tool to ultimately see Botswana flourish.
I'll have to invite you back to discuss that in greater length. But it remains for me to thank you, sir, to recognize
My
you.
pleasure.
You've been a wonderful guest. And I get the feeling that you're just scratching the surface. So we'll invite you again.
I appreciate the opportunity and the whole setup. It's fabulous. It's a quality product. Please don't stop. Come what may.
Thank you very much. So until next time, this is Mompoloki Lerumo Mogobe signing off.